Hello, friends from around the world. Great to be here with you again. I'm Dave.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jonathan. Nice to see you, Dave. Nice to see everybody.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here again, John. Today we got a really awesome interview lined up. One of my favorite authors, Fellowship of the River, Dr. Joe Tafur, will be joining us, and Dr. Rael Cahn. And this is going to be a fascinating discussion, John. Do you know anything about epigenetics?
I know a little bit about epigenetics, but I'm looking to learn more during the next 45 minutes to an hour with Dr. Joe Tafur and Dr. Rael Cahn. It's a really exciting conversation coming up because they are right now at the leading edge of research in psychedelic, psychoactive substance and their effects on the epigenetics of people, right? So it's a really special moment for us because not only that they are researching epigenetics, Dr. Rael is also a leading figure in meditation and mindfulness research. And both for you and I, meditation has been such a important practice over the years and really helped us out with our own spiritual and evolution. So it's really going to be super interesting. As well as Joe is an old friend, he helped us out in the Coming Out Day event and came here with his energy and made it such. So it's going to be a very pleasurable conversation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it will be. And I want to say to our viewers that are watching, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We would love to hear where you are from. It's such a pleasure to just get a feeling for how this mycelium spreads across every geography and continent. So say hello to us. John, if it's okay with you, without any further ado, I would like to bring on these esteemed guests. Welcome to the show. Hello, Dr. Rael Cahn.
Hello.
Dr. Tafur.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
Yeah,
Hello.
thank you for joining us today. Could you tell us each where you're tuning in from?
I'm tuning in from Boulder, Colorado.
And I'm right now in Malibu, California.
Woo! Wonderful. And check it out. We have Rasha tuning in from Dubai.
She's in Dubai, Egypt, and Alexandria, by the way.
Dylan from the Netherlands. Denise from San Antonio. Patty up in Florida. So this is wonderful. So John, could you take it away with our first question for our esteemed guests?
Yeah, I would actually would like them to present each other. So if Joe can tell us a little bit about Rael, and if Rael can tell us a little bit about Joe, so the audience get to know them a little bit more in depth.
Okay.
Maybe
yeah. Well, thank you very much. The story. Well, let's see how it goes.
Do you want to take away? Give it a start there.
Well, I'm going to introduce you, and so that's right. That's what they're asking. Yeah, so thank you very much. So thank you, Plant Medicine. Thank you for this opportunity to share about our work and what we're doing, and to get some support, try to find support. So I'm introducing my old friend Rael Cahn, Dr. Rael Cahn, MD, PhD, who is somebody I've known for a couple of decades at least, and has been a major, colleague and influence on me in my career. I talk a little bit about some of the things I learned with him in the book Fellowship of the River, and Rael was kind of always a visionary person coming into medicine, coming to medical school with an interest in studying altered states of consciousness and studying the health benefits or health effects of meditation, of also exploring psychedelic, substances and their effect on our consciousness and our health. And that was pretty radical at the time. And so that really was like an eye-opener for me, and was kind of what got me going down my path of the thank you plant medicine path, of eventually doing peyote and ceremony, and then going all the way to becoming an ayahuasquero today. And so Rael works at USC. He's faculty there at USC. He's a clinician scientist. He's an ER psychiatrist. He works as a psychiatrist in the ER. He's a psychiatrist in general, and also has his reserved time as a research faculty. And I'll let him tell us a little bit more about what he's working on. But he's also the Center for Mindfulness. I think you're the director, Rael, at USC, correct. University of Southern California. It's no small feat. And they're putting together a lot of really positive things, and just really on the cutting edge of what is becoming, I would call, integrative psychiatry, and bringing mindfulness in, and then also bringing this work with psychedelics and plant medicine similarly is in parallel to that. So it's just an honor to present Rael, who's also the principal investigator on our study, the Modern Spirit Epigenetics Project, which is a study of, so there's the MAPS MDMA-assisted psychotherapy trial for PTSD that is making big waves in the world, in the psychedelic world. And, ultimately, MDMA has its roots in the sassafras tree of North America, where the saffron oil, I believe, that's extracted from the sassafras tree, from the roots. That was that learning that you could extract that was something that the Native Americans taught the settlers. And so it is a thank you plant medicine moment. It is sassafras. It is the North American tradition, and it's MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. And so they're making incredible gains. People are having transformative healing experiences in the study. So it seemed like a really neat opportunity to try to look for biological signs of this transformative change. So that's why we're going after the epigenetics, which we can get into more later. But this is Rael Cahn. There he is. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Joe. And I'll give you an introduction as well. So as Joe mentioned, we've known each other for over 20 years. Started medical school together back at UC San Diego in 1999. And Joe is a medical doctor, family medicine trained, who took the unusual path after finishing medical school and then residency as a family medicine doctor to get involved with research in integrative medicine at UC San Diego, where I was at this time when he was finished his training as a doctor and doing some postdoctoral research and NIH-funded research. I was finally getting around to finishing up my training as an MD PhD. And so we had some time again together at UCSD, kind of supporting each other's research vision. And Joe was getting very much into psychoneuroimmunology research at the time, as well as the application of light to healing of wounds, and just curious about the role of light in human biology, the emanations of light from the body, and the use of light therapies interacting with the body for clinical impact. And soon thereafter became engaged enough and really fascinated enough with the impact on his own psychology of this traditional plant medicine approach as practiced in the indigenous traditions throughout the world, to go establish the center with shaman down in Peru, and go through the formal training process, a practitioner on top of his medical piece. And out of all that work and the clinical work involved in that training, he wrote a great book, Fellowship of the River. And where this all kind of comes back together in terms of our reason for being here today is, we've had discussions over the last 20 years about the place where science and spirit meet in regards to, these kinds of healing experiences in the realm of consciousness, and how they are transformed into the healing of psychiatric and medical illness. And this is a field of study that very underappreciated until kind of a rise of psychosomatic medicine. And probably one of the more dramatic examples of the systematic study of that is looking at medical hypnosis and meditation, mindfulness, etc., to treat the illnesses that have a stress component, and then now kind of bridging that into the great potential that psychedelics have for promoting healing at a both psychosomatic and a logical level. And out of his fascination with the impact of ayahuasca on genetic expression, he then saw this opportunity to collaborate with MAPS on this first ever phase 3 trial of a psychedelic for a very clinical condition that there's a great need, a post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's a very significant relevance of epigenetics to PTSD. The fact that people are going along through life functioning fairly well, and then something really traumatic happens, and their brain and body become very much subject to past events, haunting their day-to-day life, etc. And evidence that there are changes in the way that the DNA encodes, tendency towards expression, under expression of genes, this kind of traumatic experience, and so the relevance of psychedelic therapy and how it may be kind of ameliorating or healing those changes, really like a very nice first approach to looking at the interaction between psychedelic therapy and epigenetics. So that's what we're working on. And I'm at USC, as Joe said, whereas Joe is doing his work in the world as a physician and a shamanic practitioner. And so we've teamed up on this project together, and it's been a real honor for me to be able to work on this project within academia with your support, Joe. And thank you so much for my colleague and a leading light in the kind of application of these kinds of therapeutic approaches to real world human lives.
Thank you, Rael.
Great.
Well,
thank you so much.
Go ahead,
yeah, you good.
Well, I was going to say, it's a real pleasure to have both of you here. And it's an opportunity for us to learn about this. It's very interesting. I first got introduced to epigenetics through Joe's book, The Fellowship of the River. I mean, I have some knowledge of science, like I have a degree in physics, but I really didn't understand at all how this epigenetic stuff works. Still not sure I do, but like I thought, our genes take, millions of years to evolve, and you can't have a genetic change happen in your life. So, Joe, if you're willing, it would be great for you to explain like how this epigenetics, this software, can activate or deactivate different genes, and maybe use an example from your book, because the examples in there are so gripping, and it just really demonstrates like what it is.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so epigenetics, just kind of the way I explain it there is that first it's just epi meaning on top of the genes, right? Epigenetics, so that which lies on top of the genes. So you're talking about our DNA code and the hardware code that we're all kind of been familiarized with, that are genes, and we're going to inherit our genes, and that's going to dictate a lot of our life. But then there's this other layer that we're learning more and more about, and there's people like Bruce Lipton and the biology belief that was very popular, and a lot of people are talking about this stuff all over the place now. but that the genes themselves, they're regulated, so some are expressed more than others, and the way they're expressed, that can be modulated and changed. And so one of the simplest examples that I use a lot is just how you have the same DNA in all the cells of your body. In a red blood cell, you have the same DNA as you have in a neuron, in a brain cell, So that's the same DNA, but they're programmed differently. So they're expressed, the genes of those cells is expressed differently, and that is because of this epigenetic programming, the way the biochemical machinery that is basically the interface between the DNA and the rest of the world. So epigenetics, there it is, genes can be modulated and changed. So the genes themselves aren't changed, but the way that their expression is modulated and their expression is changed. So something that might seem very genetic may not be genetic. In fact, it may just be because of some modulation. So when Rael was earlier referring to with PTSD, where they see that they've seen these epigenetic changes around, let's say, for example, like it's another thing that people hear a lot about is cortisol levels and cortisol receptors related to stress. So these cortisol hormone receptors on your cells, the way they're expressed, that can be modulated and changed. That's changed, and we've observed that in many people. That's a big point of study of a lot of psychoneuroimmunology research, stress research, even meditation research, to see what happens to people's cortisol receptors when they have some kind of intervention. So then they know that certain people with PTSD, for example, have shown patterns of modulation that has been related to their trauma, and that other people that they've improved, that there are signs of improvement, and that there are these ways that we've demonstrated. Maybe Rael could comment on how those epigenetics can change. So we know epigenetics can be influenced by basic things like nutrition. That nutrition and your diet is going to affect the way your genes are expressed. So we see this in kind of the development of diabetes type 2. This adult onset of diabetes is influenced by epigenetics and by nutrition and things like that. And you can see exercise affecting you, your emotional experiences, your relationships. So like in a PTSD, some difficult relationship, some difficult problem, that would be related potentially to some imprints in your epigenetics. And then as we look at how epigenetics can be, so if these things become stabilized. So in a PTSD, you have this terrible trauma, gene expression is modulated, it's imprinted, and then that stays, for years. These people in that MAP study, they have treatment-resistant PTSD, average duration, something like 17 years of diagnosis. So it's not getting better, it's not changing, but can it change? And a lot of other mental health problems may have related kind of epigenetic changes. So can it change? And what have we seen that can lead to change in epigenetics in mental health problems? And so one of the things that's been shown is meditation is a possible way to alter epigenetics. Another area of study, there's not a lot of research, but there's some, but psychotherapy, that just working with somebody psychotherapeutically could also bring epigenetic change. So then when we saw these people having these transformative healing experiences, when I saw it in Peru and the Amazon and what I talk about in the book, but then also we were observing that or reading about it from the MAPS trial with MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, such a rapid transformation, somebody with 18 years of a disease that seems stable in their body, where people are going to like, well, that's how you are, chronic illness, you're never going to get better. It almost seems genetic, it's so stable. But no, it maybe is epigenetic. And then these people are having these big shifts and these big transformations. So it made us say, wow, how could we look at that? Is there any way to look at cortisol receptor epigenetics or other related genes that are involved in the way we respond to stress? Could we look for changes related to this healing experience these people had? And that's what we're talking about with Rael, where spirituality meets science, like deep emotional healing, deep spiritual healing. Where does it touch the flesh? These people's experiences are so profound. And so there's reason to believe, there's a strong argument that maybe in the epigenetics you would see changes. So that's why we started collecting saliva samples on the people going through the trial. And now we are, because the parent trial is on hold, so now we have the ones we've collected so far, while the other ones on hold, we're going to start analyzing. So we're moving into that phase, and Rael is calling those samples in from the different MAPS trial centers, and we'll move into that phase. And so that's what we're working on. So I don't know if that helps, but I kind of try to weave it into what we're doing.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Rael, do you want to add to that your perspective, or how it is connected to what's the science behind epigenetics and meditation and epigenetics and the trial you're doing right now?
Sure. Well, I can say just a couple of things that I think are most relevant there. Number one is, Joe mentioned the known epigenetic kind of touch point for PTSD is the glucocorticoid receptor and its molecular chaperone, so a gene that interacts with that receptor, kind of shields from being overactive, which has a long name, that's 5. But those two genes in particular have been found repeatedly to have some, change in this physical addition of methylation. It's an addition of a carbon molecule with 3 hydrogen molecules. By adding a little methyl group onto the promoter regions of those genes, which is basically what we're talking about at the molecular level when we talk about epigenetics. We're talking about an addition of a chemical actual, a couple of what's called a molecule, a few atoms together. That methyl group, when it's added to the promoter regions of genes, it's less likely to be expressed for that gene to then turn into messenger RNA and protein. And so it turns out that, and it's likely partly because those genes have been most often queried. But there are some assessments of PTSD that have looked more across the full genome, and these glucocorticoid related genes seem to be one of the more likely genes to show some derangement in people who have active PTSD. It also turns out that when it comes to psychoneuroimmunology, one of the findings that has now been repeated time and time again over the last 20 years as the field has really matured is that the stress system that cortisol is so central to is deeply interacting with at a chemical level the immunological. And so inflammatory pathways being kind of inappropriately overexpressed, not just kind of coming online in an assertive way when there's an infection that needs to be fought off, but kind of constitutively at a baseline level over, leading to things like arthritis, the body attacking itself, basically. That those immune pathways are related to, inappropriately kind of active cortisol signaling pathways. And also in PTSD, there have been a few findings that this set of genes in the inflammatory pathway are also a bit deranged in the genetic, expression, genetic chemical modification of DNA, people with PTSD. And it turns out that what Joe was mentioning is true. There is a growing body of evidence that meditative practices do actually impact this same mechanism of the methylation, demethylation of the DNA, all the foundation of epigenetics, the kind of setting of the DNA up by the molecular machinery of the nucleus to be more or less expressing genes. And so the inflammatory pathway has repeatedly been shown to be calmed down in association with engaging in meditative practice. Even engaging in meditative practice for kind of a one-day kind of intensive practice compared to a day of relaxing and not having stress, not engaging in the mental exercise. Turns out, looks pretty clear that there's effects on the epigenetics, all the way down to the level of genes of this kind of mental act, which is, something that certainly needs to be repeated a few times till the scientific community can say, okay, for sure this is true. But the fact that it's been shown a few times, it indicates that things are working in a way that was very unexpected. That we can see these short-term effects that gives good reason to believe that the kind of short-term intervention of an intensive psychedelic experience, appropriate clinical support, can actually have an effect on the epigenetic, the way the DNA is methylated or demethylated, and longer term for which genes are.
So it's just, I mean, the like for me, like just the important point is just that it's very reasonable to pursue this. That there's a lot of evidence and to suggest that this is a really important thing to look at, and that it's a hot idea. So we're very fortunate. But as he said, that it's combined. It's Modern Spirit, this nonprofit that's just out in the community. Pops up in Costa Rica with you guys once in a while, and just floating around. And then it's Rael at USC and MAPS. But we've as this is kind of a groundbreaking thing, very reasonable, amazing, cool idea, interesting, exciting. But it's like we have to find funding, and so we're independent. And so we've managed to pull it off. It's something I'm really proud of, that we've brought the study this far. We're into our second year. We've been collecting samples for the past year, and we've brought the study this far. But it's because of the support of people. And most of the people that have supported this study actually are the largest donors are people who had thank you plant medicine experiences, that I had come into contact with. It wasn't, you get a lot of talk from the psychedelic venture capital and all those communities, but they really haven't really appreciated the benefit or the potential benefit, or they just haven't been able to be supportive. However, the thank you plant medicine crowd has, because they've kind of like had their personal healing experiences, and they see, wow, this is really something. There's something here, and yeah, the book is exploring that, and that was part of how I came to these ideas was through inspiration, through ceremony, and through the work, and also just watching the kind of cases that were improving. And so it's very much in line with that. And so yeah, we are asking the community, like, this is something that would help for me. And that's what it's my plea to the psychedelic research organizations is, we're talking about entering the biological model with this stuff, with stuff that we know touches into deep emotional places, and we know that people have deep spiritual experiences associated, mystical experiences associated with some of this work, at least with MDMA, at least profound experiences with self-love, et cetera, and how important that is as we try to kind of bring those kinds of experiences and just that kind of healing, the value of that kind of healing into our modern society, is by showing, how it can really have a place in healthcare. And having a place in healthcare in a lot of our society means, research, and it means like showing some biological changes. That's what impacts the mind of the average person, the non-believer. They need to see that kind of data. And so that's what we're trying to do and that's what I talk about Modern Spirit. Our research is working at the intersection between, biology, emotion, and spirituality. And that's something Rael and I have been very interested in, both of our, whether it's through meditation or other ways that spiritual pursuits and spiritual practices can impact our health and ultimately benefit our society as we demonstrate the value of not just plant medicine experiences, not just meditation experiences, but of your spiritual well-being and how important that is. And if our society valued that more, the impact of that in so many little spheres of modern times. And so I think it is really a neat and a big opportunity. And I do think that we don't know what kind of results we're going to get. If we get some big results, it will be interesting. And I think it will be very impactful. And I think it will help bring traction to what you all are working on and what we're working on, which is not, we love the plants. I love the plants. I'm very grateful to the plants and to the spirituality that it helps encourage. in all of us. For those people that are not going to take the plants and are not interested, and it's not for them, but they all can benefit, by improving the spiritual well-being of each one of us and our society.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for both of you for presenting it in such a beautiful way. One of the things that is very challenging in psychedelic research is that a big chunk of it is based on qualitative, subjective stories and evidence. And I think, or the way it looks to me, is that this specific research is very interesting because it's actually bringing quantitative information that is measurable, that is repeatable, and you are collaborating with maybe one of the longest standing organizations in the world that is being researching on MDMA specifically. So you're really poised to produce information that is going to be that can change the game on how people look at the positive effects that you see subjectively as people are curing themselves through working with the MAPS program, but also on a biological level. Now, I have a question. My question is, in a perfect world where you actually get the results that you're looking to get and see those changes happening on the epigenetic level, are you looking to expand these trials? Are you looking to go into other psychoactive substances? Is that a stepping stone, or?
I'm going to comment a little bit, and then I'm going to hand it over to Rael and just give the beginner that is just that this research, our research, is very intriguing, and so we're not the only people that have thought of this idea and are interested in this idea, and so it is a very natural kind of exploration to look at epigenetic changes around psychedelic psychotherapy. So people are already initiating work with psilocybin and psychotherapy. I think at Yale they're starting to take a look at some things. So there's a few other organizations who are starting to take the look and start to plan for that. And then on our end, yes, we'd like to see this could open the door. So there's already an opportunity within the MAPS trial to extend the collection into a second phase of their study. And then there's other opportunities to look at what we find and build in other directions. Like I said, other people are going to look at psilocybin, and they're already doing that, and other people are going to look in other directions. So it's hard to say. We have to complete this and build upon the opportunities that are there right around this for us. So I'll hand it over to Rael there.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Joe said. From my perspective as an academic researcher, I certainly would be interested to follow up this initial study with a more detailed, in-depth study of larger numbers and see how repeatable and replicable the findings are. Which in the end, it's about trying to uncover the molecular basis to the ways in which these approaches to therapy are working, and understanding it at that level will both give validation within the biomedical model for why this approach should be adopted at greater levels, as well as potentially, for whom it's most likely to be benefit. If you see, people with some genetic patterning in their makeup seem to benefit even more than people with other kind of baseline epigenetic set point. And then one of the really interesting things for me, as somebody whose primary work over the years has been in neuroscience and looking at the correlation between different states of consciousness and phenomenological states of awareness and the brain state that is correlated with those, is to understand that kind of pathway from the experiences within consciousness and what brain circuits are changing in association with those experiences. In this case, the experiences of insight and healing in psychedelic therapy, and then how those particular circuitry changes seem to translate into this kind of widespread body effect of, the literal methylation or demethylation of the DNA strand, the billions of cells throughout the body. And when you think about it, it's really quite fascinating. We're not just looking at the changes of the DNA methylation in the neuron. In fact, we can't do that in humans very easily, because you'd have to, grab some neurons from inside people's skulls, which generally is not pleasant, and we don't do it. But we look at, their white blood cells. So we see that these kind of changes seem to, not be directly related to like a brain effect of mind, but a body, a body-mind relationship. And so seeing that whole pathway of how healing occurs from the level of the relationship between mental, emotional, spiritual experience, and the way the brain changes its functioning in order to facilitate those experiences, and then those particular configurations that make it more likely that the body responds this way that leads to healthy, more adaptive. That's my fascination long term, because the more we understand that, the more likely larger and larger numbers of people can have access to that kind of, and just the clinical outcomes alone, self-reports, like I feel a lot better, that makes a big difference, but it doesn't lead to the kind of integrated change to the same extent as understanding it at that fuller level.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, bless you guys for your work. It's so amazing. Feeling just honored to be here with you. I have tons of questions, a backlog of questions in my mind to ask you. I want to say thank you to our viewers for tuning in. Feel free to leave us a message. Tell us where you are. It's such a pleasure to read that, already we had people in like 4 different continents saying hello. I'd like to ask a question to Joe. It's a little bit less scientific, but it's a question that I think is interesting. So in your book, The Fellowship of the River, you recount during time spent in Peru, changes that you witnessed in people from participating in ceremonies and then kind of overcoming chronic illnesses and different issues. And you describe your own biological interpretation of what might have happened on epigenetic level. And I'm curious, Joe, like if you have thoughts on, do you think that the Icaros that are sung, so this is the first part of my question, is do you think the Icaros that are sung have an epigenetic impact? And my second part is, do you think that if a person has a difficult experience versus like an absolute bliss experience, do you hypothesize that one might have a more of an epigenetic impact than the other?
Yeah, okay. Good, cool question. I want to say hi to Alba, that's out there, that said hello. And then Ali and Sholo. Sholo is here. Amazing. Yeah, so first question, Icaros. First, to frame it, that I believe, and so now I don't have Rael's at the university, and so he's, I can be very foolish in how I talk about things and do things as I'm just out there working. But I also have my experience, my personal experience, which I respect. And so I don't just poo-poo things because I don't understand how it works, molecularly. It's like what we said, there's the two sides. We want to gain the traction of the molecular discussion, and we do. If it's real, there should be something changing in the molecules. And so we're all about that, and we love it, and that's my thing, spiritual healing, love, science. But at the same time, there is the subjective experience that is very impactful, and it is enough to, a lot of mental health research is based on subjective experience. In other words, does this person feel depressed anymore or not? And you got to ask them, and they feel well. So subjective experience is very influential in research as well, and just in our everyday lives, the reality of our personal lives when we trying to decide what we're going to do, if we're going to try this or try that, and you ask your friend and you try to find out how it worked for them. So as a human being, I would say it's my belief that love influences epigenetics. So the lack of love, when we look at epigenetic changes related to or associated with, let's say, childhood maltreatment, or at the very least, the maltreatment of rodents and monkeys in research studies, that what I would call a lack of love, that versus a loving parental kind of support that they didn't have, seemed to make the difference. And there's epigenetic changes associated with that. And so to me, it seems to make sense that we know that a lack of love can lead to epigenetic changes, let's say in a growing child, or there's definitely reason to make that statement. Maybe I don't have all the proof of all the little points, but it makes sense what I'm saying. Next is that love later, like in a psychotherapeutic relationship, that really, some people, the general theory of love, a book I talk about all the time, they kind of make their argument that the main thing that determines whether or not a psychotherapeutic experience is going to be effective is whether or not the therapist is able to reflect a loving presence to the person. So there's that kind of reasoning, and they have their evidence, UCSF psychiatrists, to make that argument. And then we see that that psychotherapeutic relationship can lead to epigenetic change. There's reason to believe that that's there. And so they talk about, limbic resonance and the way that we tune into each other's limbic systems. And we get a bridge into Rael's world of the neural circuitry and how things function in the brain, with this idea that we, in our emotional states, we can open them to each other and connect to each other. And in fact, that they're quite open and that they exist in relationship, and that we're very social biological creatures that way. And so in that space of connecting to somebody's emotional world, their inner world, just as you would in a therapeutic relationship, psychotherapeutic relationship, in that space where we open kind of a realm of possibilities for some kind of change to happen, a change in the way they see themselves, a change in who knows, it leads to all kinds of change in their body, psychosomatic changes in their physical health. And so that's also real, and it's very important. And so singing Icaros is first, on that level, is about that. It's about coming into this space. There's different ways to sing Icaros, but I'm talking about the Shipibo tradition of one-on-one singing, like an energetic healing process is how we describe it, that you're trying to create a shift. You're trying to encourage a shift. And so is that moment actually what brings the epigenetic change? I would not say, I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe, I hope so sometimes. So, miracles happen. And then sometimes it happens as part of a larger integration process. And maybe the moment of that song or the energetic shift related to that song opened a path to where these other processes can happen. So I would say, I don't think it hurts to sing Icaros to somebody's epigenetics. And that's the main point, So everybody who wants to just, pin it just on this magic, and they want that so that they can believe that it's real, when it's about what you feel. And if it's real to you, I guess it's real. So a lot of amazing things have happened while singing Icaros, but we're not doing that we're doing that in the hope that it helps. And then the next question was the bliss versus the bad. Yeah, I think both of those kinds of experiences are can be very impactful. And so the people chasing the bliss on the bliss train, that's great to have a blissful experience, and it can be very, very helpful. And I think some of people's MDMA, big psychotherapeutic experiences, some of it is a bliss experience that allows them to kind of, reprocess some things from that perspective. At the same time, some things are difficult in life, and some things are painful, and it's not pleasant to go through it. It's not pleasant to grieve a loved one, Life isn't about bliss in that sense. It can be wonderful to be blissful and meditative and open-hearted to everything that comes, but that some pain is severe, and that is part of our growth. I think that's also true. So in the experiences, I do not, in my experience, people's healing process around ayahuasca, where they have both of those, You know, they might switch back and forth between those. Not maybe some people might have a real difficult experience, and then they have a beautiful one the next night, and then that person switches with the other one. They're jealous of each other. But as long as they're making progress is the most important thing. So too much focus on the experience itself, you know, is one of the pitfalls of the psychonautic movement. You know, when really it's about the healing. And so the MDMA-assisted psychotherapy is a 12-week intervention with a lot of therapy, a lot of interaction with these people. And so they're really impacting a major disease process. And, you know, maybe there's other ways people can support each other, maybe in lighter experiences, and really have personal breakthroughs and help and make a lot of progress. But to help somebody like that, that's a little bit more advanced. And I think when you get into the more advanced, it's not just a happy time all the time. It gets rough sometimes too. But that's what makes the difference for that person. So it's all about how deep you're needing to go. You know, if it's just to have, you know, a good community experience, but if it's somebody that's been suffering for decades, you know, it may need a little more kind of discipline, a little more rigor, and a little more like hard times in the experience.
Thank you very much. Beautiful answer.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'd like to take us a little bit to the future of your research, and maybe you can tell the viewers what is ahead, what's the time frames you're looking to complete. We know that COVID came in and a lot of probably difficulties came your way or came the way of research, but maybe you can give an overview of what's next for the work you're doing right now.
Sure. Yeah. So the our kind of vital partners in doing this epigenetics project are all the different sites that are running participants through the MDMA therapy protocol as part of MAPS phase 3 trial. And yes, it's true, you know, all of them kind of shut down their in-person interaction with their patients as part of COVID restrictions that have come over the last few months in America. So, and what that meant for us, unfortunately, is there's a number of participants who had given the saliva samples at the first, before they started the 12-week therapy intervention, and you know, with 2 days of more intensive therapy, and then a lot of build up therapy before and after that. And then because those last few visits were not done in person, we weren't able to obtain like, so there has been, you know, some both slowdown of the recruitment process, quite significant, as well as some loss of, some of the samples to fill out our data. That being said, a number of sites are making plans, so are coming back online and to people through their protocol, and we have in the range of around 30 to 40 participants whose samples we have pre and post that are more than half of which have now been sent to Dr. Candace Lewis's lab in Phoenix, Arizona at PGen, Translational Genomics Institute. She works as a postdoc, and so within the next month we'll have, you know, these samples will process of uncovering exactly what the DNA changes are related to the therapy. We'll start to kind of resolve it. Will take some months to get the full results, and also to, you know, do statistical comparison between, you know, those results, what we see in the DNA, and what people reported in regards to their self-reported resolution or lack of resolution with their PTSD symptoms, as well as the associated, you know, depression, mindfulness, some of these aspects of psychological function that have been collected as part of the trial. The next phase, it's called phase 2, MAP, or the MAPP2 phase of this phase 3 trial, was supposed to have started a couple months ago and hasn't yet started because of COVID. They've had to, essentially, the IRB that's approving that second phase for MAPS required, like all IRBs, a number of adjustments related to how are we going to make sure that this research doesn't inadvertently lead to more COVID spread. So I don't know exactly where that stands, but I do know that they are hopeful that they'll be able to start soon now that have started the lesson. Of course, we're playing it all by ear because of some of the cases now. But even in the worst case scenario, that there's a few more months of slowdown, once it gets going again, it will take about a year for that second phase. And so in these next 6 months or so, we'll have preliminary answer on a smaller data set about what kind of relationship is there, and then in about a year and a half to 2, we'll have a more complete answer about does the second set of samples kind of reinforce what we find in this first set or not, and what can we really conclude from this study in regards to whether there's an association, epigenetic change, and healing from trauma through this approach. And also, what are the one of the critical things that the data set will allow us to look at is, are those changes in epigenetics related to the improvements in PTSD symptoms? Are they the same regardless of whether you got placebo and got better through placebo, or whether you got the MDMA? Looking at not just the change related to the MDMA psychotherapy, but the difference between the changes through that approach and through the approach where you're still getting the psychotherapy but with placebo instead. Are there different mechanisms involved, and what does that mean about the essentiality or not of the MDMA process?
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you for laying that down for us. I think it's important to, also for the viewers to understand that it really takes a few years. It looks to me like 4 years or 5 years for being able to get to conclusion. I'd like to...
But I'm just going to throw it in there. I don't want to throw it in there. But like with this preliminary, we won't have the conclusion, but preliminary data, if we have 2 months to analyze and maybe a couple months to write up the paper, our goal, it's possible that by the end of this year, 2020, this big watershed year, that we would be part of that. I mean, that's a hope that we have, that we could have something to show all the good people that want to support us, that we're going to have something to show for it. That's right, Dave.
Yeah. We'll definitely have a publication on the initial data set.
Yeah. But the conclusion, and you're right too, Jonathan. I mean, the conclusion, of course, is further along. But my point is that we're fighting, we're struggling to make this thing happen and realize. But we also want to show people something. We want to see it too, and we're getting closer to that. But that's why we need the support now, because it's the laboratory analysis phase is the expensive phase, with the epigenetics, and to be able to plan for the future for these other phases are going to start picking back up when the COVID, hopefully we make some progress there.
Yeah, and it's really for the viewers to understand that what you guys are doing is also for the benefit of the global community that is looking for these modalities to the larger public, because this kind of research will bring it to mainstream in a more palatable, kind of more accessible way. So I do think that the global community should adhere to that as well. I have a, before we close the conversation, if both of you can share a personal story of growth or healing. Rael, you can do it from your meditative experience, and maybe Joe from your plant medicine experience, something that personally changed in you as you worked with these practices in the tradition of the thank you plant medicine.
Yes. Yeah, I would probably pull from the Rolodex there and say, go to the beginning. This is kind of fun because Rael's here, but my first peyote experience, peyote is a delicate resource, and I'm not trying to over-promote peyote consumption, but there is a place that I know in Arizona called the Peyote Way Church of God that is focused on sustainability and peyote sacramental use. And when Rael and I were in medical school, I was really depressed and having a hard time and really struggling. And we went on a road trip to Arizona. I brought him to Arizona with me just to go from San Diego. And we went to, we were in Arizona hanging out, and we decided to make contact with the Peyote Church. And we ended up going there. And I was actually quite scared. I had a little bit of experience. I think Rael was a little more prepared, as I talk about in the book. When we first drank it out there, he was kind of meditating by the fire, just serene, and I was rolling around on a lawn chair, just like regretting, like just thinking I just made the biggest mistake of my life, because I was told earlier that day that if I missed the first days of my surgery rotation, I would have to repeat the 12 weeks. And just part of the regime that we were under at that time. And so I was really regretting it. I was like, oh God, what a mistake. And look at Rael, he's fine. He's loving it. And there was just some moment when it went from just all the gastrointestinal discomfort and to just something kind of shifted. And I felt this presence, I was aware of a presence. And we were in that ceremony, you're supposed to do it alone, and they encourage you not to talk to each other too much. And we respected that. But there was a moment when I just, whoa, like something else is here right now. And I just said to Rael, I was like, because I had read the Carlos Castaneda, Mezcalito, he calls it, Mezcalito's here. And Rael just kind of nodded, like, yep. And then that just opened up an experience where all of a sudden my internal dialogue completely stopped. And I had kind of open access to my heart and my emotional experience, and was able to kind of process what had been happening in my life, in the course of my life, from that place, from a place that was more integrated into my senses, integrated into the present, integrated into my heart and my feelings without like any commentary. And it was so magical, and I felt so connected to nature where we were in the desert, and spirituality and just the mystical universe, that I just had like an incredible joy that overcame me. And we stayed with that, and we had our little adventure through the night and into the next day. And that experience really pulled me out. I wasn't like a complete, I wasn't like, I didn't struggle sometimes afterwards, but it really pulled me out of where I was. And it really gave me the strength to complete medical school and finish. And so I'm eternally grateful to the people to Rael for encouraging me to explore it, and to the people at the Peyote Church, Matt and Annie, that are still around, and their family, because it really set me on my path. And it made me curious about ayahuasca and my family's connections to the Amazon and Colombia. And that's how I got started. So it was about my personal healing. So that's one. Yeah, thank you, plant medicine.
That's quite a memory for me as well. I had a somewhat similar experience to that sense of the internal dialogue stopping and kind of being plunged into a kind of field of experiencing energy and a sense of possibility, and I think there was a sense of just aliveness that actually came out of a meditation retreat that I did while as a medical student. I had done a 10-day meditation retreat before medical school, which really helped cement my own sense of clarity around that there's really something of importance and most definitely a neuroscientific reality to exploring the brain correlates to meditative practice. There's something that shifts that's so dramatic that there must be some very interesting and dramatic shifts at the brain activity level as well. But then, as a medical student, I did another 10-day retreat, and it was in the midst of that retreat that after a few days of, this intense practice, and a lot of times as you get into meditation, mostly what you're aware of is just how out of control your mind is, and just kind of watching it, and, you become a little bit kind of like an appreciative viewer of the comedy of it all, that, you're just kind of going in circles on the same track over and over, and it seems to be completely beyond any control whatsoever. But then as you gain some skill and kind of refraining from actively kind of going off on this path or the other path of rumination, some spontaneous experiences of kind of deep well-being and kind of fineness of perception will overcome you. And so, that there was a particular day about midway through where I first started to have contact with that experience of, the internal dialogue just kind of, becoming less and less loud, to the point where it just stopped. And for, periods that, it was hard to measure in terms of time, because, a lot of the reference points for perception of the passage of time are related to, the conversation that we're having with ourselves as we sit or experience life, or the movements that we're doing in the world. And here I'm just sitting, and then, the other perception was just of these kind of the vibrational element of experience that was occurring in the same space as kind of conceptual life having largely disappeared in terms of an ongoing dialogue. And that experience, which led to a kind of lightness of being, also led to a sense that, not just that there's some very interesting neuroscientific realities to uncover with regards to meditative practice, but also, that there's really an application of these kinds of practices for helping to give people a freedom, and especially freedom from ongoing dialogues that we end up being stuck with out of difficult encounters and patterns in our upbringing, and exposures to the challenging aspects of how we treat each other in the world, and to kind of reorient our life in a way that's much more aligned with higher values and greater sense of capacity to choose how to move through the world. So, yeah, that experience was not mediated by the use of substances, but I think has some resonance with experiences that people have through the use of substances, and that's an area of interest, how these kinds of experiences of freedom of consciousness can come out means that are both natural and then sometimes aided by substance.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Rael. It's beautiful to see the parallels between Joe's story and your story, and how you can achieve greater freedom, inner freedom from emotions or thoughts that bother us through the different paths, and how they complement each other. So it's really exemplifies what both Dave and I believe in, and I think many people in the Think About Medicine movement believe in. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's great. Maybe you can share with us how people can support, where can people support Joe, where they can find you.
Yeah, so it's been, the link has been there on the chat to the fundraiser, the crowdfund on through GoFundMe, but that's accessible most easily through modernspirit.org. Kind of easier to keep track of, modernspirit.org. And so you go through modernspirit.org, and then that'll take you there's links to the crowdfunder, to the campaign. There's also links to more information about the research study. There's a little bio on Rael and a way to find out more about him on the research team section, on our epigenetics expert, Candace Lewis is talked about there, and just the whole general team of Modern Spirit. So there's a lot more information there, with also links to the crowdfund where they can donate freely through the internet. And tax-deductible donation, it's a nonprofit organization. So through that, and links to my other work is there, links to find Rael, learn more about his work and some of our other friends. It's all there. And I think Thank You Plant Medicine is in the community links section of Modern Spirit as requested. And so we're very grateful to be in the network with you, linked up. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Dave,
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I learned a lot today. It's been a real fascinating discussion. Appreciate your work. Appreciate your vibes and how you guys are doing this work carefully and with such a spirit of service to try to help people and raise awareness in the mainstream and do things the right way. And you are a couple of real conscientious lads, and hope we can get together in person someday. I admire both of you a lot. So thanks a lot for everything you're doing.
Thank you too.
Thank you
guys for having us.
Pleasure to be with you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And for more great things to come. So thank you. Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.